In this video, we're gonna be analyzing how a top chess grandmaster outplays his casual opponents, but we've got a little bit of a twist to this. So the criterias that I use to pick the following games are gonna be really beginner friendly in a way that you can definitely apply the following tips and tricks in your own game. So there should be no opening traps, so you don't need any like concrete knowledge about the position and just to get your opponent there and get a free win. Also, there should be no tactics allowed. So, yeah, if you're a chess beginner, you're still pretty new in calculating lines, and this is clearly not the video where you're gonna see any crazy queen sack or stuff like that. As I was saying, no sacrifices. I mean, not even a pawn is gonna be sacrificed in this video, and we're gonna only focus on solid principal moves. So as our main model player for this video, I decided to have Magnus Carlsen, and we're gonna see how he likes to positionally outplay his opponent. So without further introduction, let's just dive right into the games. So for the first game, we've got Magnus with the white pieces playing against Potapov Pavel, who's rated 2267. And as you can see on the screen, Magnus's rating is about only 2450. So this game is played back in 2003, and well, Magnus was, yeah, I guess about to turn 13 years of age, but he was already quite a strong international master and opens up the game with d4. And opponent plays the move f5. And here we can already get our first quote of the video that if you know your opponent is trying to play the Dutch defense, you may very well let him play it, because the Dutch opening does not have the greatest reputation of all time. However, I can definitely understand people that have fun playing it. I mean, after all, who doesn't like to lose? So, game continues with knight f3. We see knight f6. White goes for a positional setup with g3. Both sides go for fianchetto. We see castles, and white now plays for c4, stepping in the center. We can already see that black is going for the Leningrad variation of the Dutch, which we can figure out by noticing the presence of the fianchetto. We see d6, knight to c3, queen to e8, preparing to play potentially the e5 break. However, Magnus's opponent felt the need to follow it up with queen f7, hitting the c4 pawn, and after b3, he went for the move knight e4, which is initiating some trades. Magnus, just completes development, plays bishop to b2, black goes knight c6, and now just makes another useful waiting move, rook to c1. We see h6 by black, simply perhaps preparing g5 in the future, or once again trying to take a similar approach of staying flexible. We see the move d5 now, hitting the enemy knight while expanding in the center. So rook c1 was a preparatory move, making sure the knight is protected in advance so we can expand and grab more space. Knight goes to e5. We see a knight trade, and after bishop takes on e5, white has many ways of playing it. However, yeah, I really like the way Magnus goes for this. He plays f4, hitting the bishop, and then after bishop to g7, he goes for the simple queen c2. So his main idea is to play knight takes on e4. That would be like the ideal move. But the issue is that the bishop on b2 would remain undefended. So therefore, in this position, he prefers the move queen to c2, threatening to simply win a pawn due to knight takes on e4 on the next move, since now bishop takes on b2 can be met by queen captures. We see knight takes on c3, so black cannot really do much about that. Also, no need to be afraid of bishop d4 check, since there is simply e3 and the bishop has to step back. So black just decides to go for the trades. I mean, at the end of the day, how bad can this be? It's just a pretty symmetrical position with yeah, not much going on. It may look at first glance. However, Magnus does have the extra space and decides to make use of it by expanding in the center with e4. Now we see bishop takes on c3, queen takes on c3, pawn takes on e4, rook takes on e4. Bishop hits the rook steps back, sidestepping the attack. Now black plays b6, potentially stopping ideas such as c5, taking and then infiltrating with the queen. However, I don't think that would have necessarily been the main field to focus on, but definitely remains an option for white to play on both sides of the board. Definitely the main thing that comes to mind is highlighted by Magnus's last move, which is rook c e1, focusing onto the backward e7 pawn. And the main reason why it's named the backward pawn, at least to my knowledge, is that it's simply a pawn that cannot be protected by other pawns, which makes it rather vulnerable, and also it cannot really advance, so it's fixed by the d5 pawn. I know maybe some of you may be wondering, could an e5 be a good move? And maybe this is not like the best example since fe is a move, but I just wanted to highlight the fact that the en passant would also be possible in this position, not only hitting the queen but suddenly opening up a bishop's path towards the enemy rook. So after rook ae1, white is already having a very nice initiative because of the really weak pawn onto e7. We see the move rook e8, simply protecting, and now white goes for bishop e4, which is a pretty interesting strategical idea that I quite like. Magnus, definitely from a young age, having a very good understanding of a position. I remember while growing up personally, I used to be let's say quite afraid of exchanging a lot of pieces, especially against low rated players, because that really gave me the false sense that, you know, with less pieces on the board, opponent has more chances to make a draw, and that always gave me a little bit of anxiety when I trade pieces. I mean, now that I'm much older, I obviously get very excited with any exchange that I can make that takes me closer to a draw. Definitely bishop e4 is a move that I like. Now, black decides to step back, but white's bishop is quite powerful. The main idea of the bishop trade, by the way, is that the e6 square is quite weak. So imagine we can trade bishops off the board, and then the rook could potentially just infiltrate and then just exert a lot of pressure against the enemy king. However, for now, we see bishop back, bishop f3 by white, queen to f6, and queen to d3. So definitely trades are fine, but I think keeping queens is the best practical approach, since definitely these pawns are quite vulnerable. And even though after the bishop trades we only have rooks and queens on the board, the enemy king is still very much in danger. So I definitely like that call. We see king g7, queen to e2, setting up a little bit of the Alekhine gun. I don't know what they call this construction where you've got all the heavy pieces lined up against one pawn. Maybe Alekhine gun is when the queen is like behind both rooks. You guys correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But black just protects with rook to f7. Now we see bishop to g4. And at this point, black can no longer avoid the trade. So white is forcing bishops off. And then you see that we're going to be slowly infiltrating onto that very juicy e6 square. White starts with king to g2, simply improving the position. We see h5, taking a bit of space, but now rook e6 is definitely really like an unpleasant thorn in, thorn or torn. I'm not sure like what the pronunciation there is. It's really annoying thorn in black's position. And yeah, I mean, I think the game just speaks for itself, so let's just watch it together. We see king to f8, h3, keeping ideas of, pushing g4. I mean, not immediately. We can even think of the queen trade first, followed by g4. Here, black thought he could maybe try to grab the chance here and get some counterplay, because in case of gh4, maybe queen takes on f4 would have given black some activity. I mean, I guess that was black's thinking process. However, Magnus goes for a little bit of a surprising move, but definitely super powerful. Best move on the board, queen to g4, initiating the queen trade in a favorable version while threatening to collect the g6 pawn. And for this reason, queen takes on h4 also there. Black simply found himself in a situation where he had to trade, improving white's pawn structure, and then the following endgame, pawns are equal, material is equal, but white's strategical domination simply proves to be decisive. So the game continued without really much counterplay by black. I mean, g5 gets played with a simple threat, going rook h1, rook h6, and then you can say goodbye to the g6 pawn, since there will be no way to defend it. Black decides to give up on the backward pawn, trying to activate using the other rook, which is definitely a strategy that in general I would recommend. Whenever you have such a passive position to defend, it's much better to give up a pawn, try to become active rather than staying passive the whole game and losing without counterplay. Definitely big thumbs up for black's attitude. Too bad it's not enough to save this position. We see a5, rook to e8, getting rid of that annoying rook, keeping the rook on the f file quite restricted. And after king h7, king g4, yeah, simply grabbing a bit of space. And now slowly Magnus is putting black in a zugzwang. And the reason why this is a zugzwang is because if you move the king, then rook f6 is quite annoying. And then we can maybe break with f5. And besides that, if you move the rook, there is rook e7 check, yes. And if you play rook d7, that allows f5. So basically, this is what zugzwang means. Whatever you do, you're giving your opponent a winning move, basically. So black decides king h7, rook f6, rook e7. Now, obviously, all the king and pawn endgames are easily winning for white after something like f5. We can fix the enemy pawns, many moves to win this, but long story short, we're gonna infiltrate with the king, give up the f6 pawn because we can collect the whole queen side, which is, yeah, not too bad of a deal, if you ask me. So instead of this, black tries to keep rooks on the board, but f5 is simply too powerful. You can try to activate, but that would simply allow rook f7, so the position is just very bad for black. Now we see a very nice little intermediate check with rook g6, followed by rook e6, and now black does not even get this chance of activating anymore. We see pawn to g6, king g7, king g5, and once again, the second zugzwang of the game, if rook goes back, rook e7, and after the king moves, there is rook e8. As a move, also king f6 wouldn't be such a terrible idea either, but yeah, king f5. This is perhaps the classiest zugzwang because now, I mean, black literally has no move. This is even better than king f6 actually, now that I'm looking at it, because this is just a huge threat, okay? The rook will have no squares, and if you go king h6, there is check, picking up the rook. So definitely another lovely zugzwang by Magnus. Yeah, black simply has the moves. Played c5. En passant is once again a thing here, but king e6 is simply superior. And after rook a7, you don't even start collecting the pawns, okay? Because that allows king g6. But rook e7 forces resignation because black now has to exchange rooks. And then as we discussed already, the following endgame is just easily winning for white. So yeah, if you were looking for a weapon against the Dutch, you may wanna consider this double fianchetto and follow this modern game played by the 14 years old Magnus Carlsen. Just a quick interruption. If you're really enjoying this kind of content, please consider liking the video because that will help the YouTube algorithm push it towards more people. And without further interruption, let's just continue with the games. Now, in the next game, Magnus Carlsen is only 11 years old, but the main reason why I decided to pick this game, I think it's a perfect illustration of why, in my opinion, beginners shouldn't really try to play the King's Indian defense as black, since it's definitely a very hard opening to play. I think white just gets much easier play because of the central domination that we are about to see. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big King's Indian lover. I played that opening over a decade. It's in fact my favorite opening, but It's definitely really gonna take a lot of time, and it really requires a bit of a sharper tactical understanding of the game in order to become a successful King's Indian player. So, without more sophisticated words, let's see how the game begins. We see e4 this time, and after d4, g6, we do get a transposition into the King's Indian lines, and Magnus simply goes for the Zamish variation by playing f3, which I think was quite topical at the time. Definitely recall a lot of games by Karpov. In like, let's say, that period, I think were pretty famous, and definitely I do believe that for beginners, the Zamish is one of the easiest ways that you can play against the King's Indian defense. Now, to give you a little bit of an insight as an experienced King's Indian player, and that's the opening that I actually used in my last game that made me an official IM. I had to win with the black pieces against the GM on demand. I played the King's Indian and got it. I'm definitely pretty happy when I see the Zamish, because the Zamish is definitely an invitation to get a game. And I think any rating range that you're playing, you should still try to play as ambitious as you can. And Zamish is quite an easy way to do so. And if you play it properly, you can definitely even use it at grandmaster levels. So, uh, okay, just ignore me. I'm talking too much for some reason and not going into the games. Black played the move knight bd7, bishop to e3 by white c6, and now knight g2. Bishop to d3 is actually a move that I think Karpov used to play quite a lot, with ideas to go for a short castle and play it positionally. However, definitely this is a flexible opening. You can play it in many ways. f3 is a nice move. Main drawback of it is that the g1 knight doesn't really have the natural square to develop, but in exchange you do get some other easy ideas. Let's say, as we've seen in the game, like knight e2, queen d2, e5. Right, immediately responded with d5 here. Now, in Modern Fury, definitely you can consider moves such as rook d1, just staying flexible, perhaps allowing black to take and enter some kind of a Marochi bind. By the way, I'm not super sure rook d1 is good in the specific position, but rook d1 is a thematic idea to delay this kind of decision to push. Definitely d5 super thematic though. We see this move now. Yeah, what can I say? This is typical for low-rated players. They just go for c5. Okay. The main reason I think why this got played is, I think the player with the black pieces, who's like a 1768 100 guy, well, obviously was afraid of the pawn. Now, the main reason why I didn't pick games between like super strong players is I really want to make this video as relatable as I can, since I'm trying to show that you can beat opponents like 1700, 1800s, even more than that, without using any fancy plays, just by placing your pieces better and kind of having a bit of a decent idea of what you're trying to achieve in the game. And the black player here went for c5, which is definitely a bad move, because it's definitely blocking the position, and that's gonna be very hard for black to play. I think should have definitely tried something like cd. cd should have been kind of forced. Like ed, I think it's a mistake because of something like 98 followed by f5, and black is getting very decent play. But yeah, white would have gone cd, then typical maneuver for the Zamish. They get a knight towards b3, bishop e2 short castle, white tries to expand on the queen side, and so on. I do believe that white is better, and the variation that was picked by black is simply inferior, but that's not really the main topic for us. We see the move c5, and now I simply go with g4. Already having ideas to attack. Okay, we see knight b6, going for the one mover, typical for lower rated players. So yeah, if there is an advice that I think can be really beneficial for you guys watching, I think always try to think in terms of pawn breaks and not in terms of concrete moves. Okay, like concrete moves are fine, especially when the position is like wide open, when there is stuff to calculate. But here, okay, let's look at this. No pawns have been traded, no open files. This is the best definition of a closed position. So what is knight b6 doing? One mover attack. Definitely bad move. If you look at this position and you try to think in terms of pawn breaks, Black has two major ideas. So one of them is to deliver the f5 pawn break, the main idea for the King's Indian. And the other one is to somehow sacrifice a pawn with a6, b5 and try to open up some lines on the queen side and gain some counterplay. And what knight b6 does, it's definitely stopping the a6, b5 idea. Plus, I said knight 8 f5 is an idea. Forgot to mention it's not the greatest of ideas here because I mean white can just open up the g file and most likely get an overwhelming attack, but just trying to give you a decent idea of how the King's Indian generally works. Okay, we see knight b6, knight g3, simply getting the knight onto a nice square, preparing to push while defending the c4 pawn. The black goes knight e8 and then bishop to d3, just developing, not really a move that we need, but kind of prophylactic against f5. Magnus takes that square under control since, well, we can definitely just, I think, take with a pawn. That's like the simplest. And yeah, black is not going to be regaining that, and white is simply winning here. So instead, black now goes for queen f6, hitting the f3 pawn, which white just defends with a bishop. Queen goes back to e7, and now white is pushing the h pawn, just going for the slow squeeze. And a lot of the times, the typical idea might be h5 combined with either a6, going for the blockade, and then maybe like, just to give you an example of how this would look in case black does nothing. Let's say we can even get in h6 and then bishop h8. Sometimes there could be like a fun idea. Let's say they do nothing to just play knight f5. G takes, and then like rook dg1 could be getting a great attack against the enemy king. Okay, I'm not saying this works great in this position or nor that I played it perfectly, but it's definitely something that you may want to keep in mind. While, yeah, another idea is simply to just go h5, open up the file, trade the enemy bishop, play queen h6, and brutally checkmate black. So, black just goes f6, taking the ultra solid defense position. Definitely this is not gonna be working in long term. Yeah, but something that I learned over the years that sure, passive defense may prolong the fight, but the fight it's not gonna end well. So it's really like in a boxing match if you think about it. Like if there is one guy throwing punches, like you're not gonna be able to hold your ground forever. You're gonna have to like crack at some point, you know, like it's just simply, yeah, not possible to survive with such passive play. And there is one reason why Magnus Carlsen said he does not believe in fortresses. Now, fortresses are, let's say, some situations that are already analyzed. So it mostly happens into the endgame. And there are some positions where even though one side is passive, somehow there is no way for the opponent to make the breakthrough. However, Magnus is known for this capacity of just playing forever, grinding you down, and then even though you do have a fortress, you could defend, you're simply not gonna be physically capable in defending that fortress for like 3 hours. So, yeah, long story short, don't play passive. It's not the key to success. I didn't find the key to success either, but I can tell you for sure this one is not. So, white went for h5. Black now tries to set up this marvelous blockade, but the bishop is now pretty set, obviously, and white still has a side of the position to break. Now, the king side is close, but there is room for a3, b4 because we've got this hook on c5. So once again, these positions are like so easy if you just think in terms of pawn breaks, okay? Most of the beginners will just become lost in such, closed and complex looking positions because they look for one movers and they're not really like helpful since everything is defended. But if you think in terms of pawn breaks, the game is just easy. There is really not that much to look for, despite having, let's say, all the pieces on the board. White decides to castle because the king is very safe there. We place the king on the king side since we already discussed that white will be focusing on the queen side with a3 before, so there's no reason to get the king there. Black goes h6, and now we get the knight onto the juicy outpost, which, you know, black could still try to ignore, but the knight is like really gonna be such an annoying piece. I mean, you cannot really live with such a knight in your living room right there on f5. That's very hard to feed, you know. It's like not easy. So bishop takes on f5 gets played immediately. And maybe this could be an exercise for you guys watching, because white has two ways of recapturing. I can give you a little bit of a hint. One rule says that, let's say in these kind of situations, when we have a choice, we should be capturing towards the center to improve our control over the center. But as you already know, chess is not really like math. The rules are not really applicable like just like that, you know, you just do that every time. And therefore, in this position, it's time to break the rule. Yes, you heard it right. We're going to be taking the opposite way. And the main reason why we do so, it's quite specific. So when you're thinking about a chess position, you really want to have this kind of standard rules memorized, but it's always about trying to look at the specific positions that you have and watch out for like some specific nuances that you can spot. And after we take back with the e-pawn, the obviously main point is that, ooh, we just got the most amazing knight that I've ever seen in a while on e4, which is putting pressure on c5, definitely supporting our fundamental plan of going a3, b4, breaking black's position. Now, okay, the game is not really, I mean, it's already strategically decided, material is even, but black is completely lost. Like if you turn on the engine in this position, it's gonna say like +3, +4 advantage. I mean, maybe we can do a test. Yeah, +4 already. I mean, I did analyze these games before, but I didn't really remember what the score was. And okay, in this position, white simply goes for b4. Okay, something that I quite like. No need to play a3. That was definitely fine with the idea to take back with a pawn. But after b4, my guess is that on cb4 there was c5 idea. And if you take, then I think you can say goodbye to this exchange after bishop takes on c5. And not even sure I would take that exchange, but definitely it's there and it's completely winning. So for this reason, black does not even take and plays knight d7. Now, if they would be in time with b6, the structure would be a bit harder to crack. However, still a4, a5 seems to be breaking through somehow. Like maybe if they play b6, another nice maneuver that maybe you want to keep in mind is bishop d1, bishop a4, and then either infiltrate with the bishop or exchange the enemy knight, since the bishop on e2 is a bit restricted, but this is a nice maneuver to kind of bring it back into the game. Okay, not the case. I just took on c5 and went for d6, immediately breaking through and just interrupting queen's defense. Queen's defending the c5 pawn, and we can literally just collect it on the next move. Knight took, bishop took. Okay, d7 flat in this position, hitting both the queen and the rook. So opponent tries to block. Now the game is just kind of decided. The rest is not really that interesting, but yeah, level of desperation in that position, since white is threatening to play rook a b1 and rook b7, and black is unable to bring the knight back into the game because the rook hangs, since the rook will no longer defend the other. Black just sacrifice the knight. This is what you end up doing if you're like messing around with the King's Indian as a beginner, I feel like. So once again, my kind suggestion, if you're looking for a first opening against d4, don't play the King's Indian, okay? Maybe your second opening could be that, but first, pick up something easier, like maybe the Slav defense, especially the reverse London that I recommend on the channel, and we have it in the rating climb. Now, white took. Rest of the game is pretty easy. White is up a rook. Black throws in one last trick, threatening to go queen g3 and then perpetual check. Of course, I mean, Magnus never really fails for such things. So just plays it for pawn takes and then rook to b7, forcing queens off and just winning endgame with the extra rook. And resignation was forced in this position after the classy little exchange sack with the pawn that was about to promote. So yeah, I think that should serve well as a decent guide of how to be the King's Indian as a beginner. Yeah, if you've been kind of struggling to find an easy and effective setup to play, definitely you could consider to yeah, get the Zamish into your repertoire. So with that being said, I think we can move on to the next game. Okay, guys. So the reason why I picked the next game is because I find it really instructive and a little fun fact about it. It was played in a simul exhibition, meaning that Magnus has to play against multiple opponents. My guess is normally around 10, 20. I mean, maybe even 30. 30 would be a little bit too much, but I guess around 20 opponents at the same time. And this is going to be one of the games. So, we don't really know what the rating of his opponent is. I mean, we can make the assumption that that's a chess enthusiast, and we're gonna see by his moves, it's actually not that bad. He gets like a decent opening, but Magnus, it's gonna do his little Magnus things, just playing the hedgehog structure. So, game starts with d4. We see c4. No London this time, sadly. Please don't click away of this video. d6 by black. Hello, King's Indian. Bishop to g2. We've got the knight out. And black now decides to strike in the center by playing the move c5. Magnus simply goes knight c3. To be honest, I think the approach of going dc5 is kind of interesting. It's a bit dull, but I think it's not that easy to play for black. But we see simply knight c3, giving black the chance of, you know, like taking on d4 and then just entering like a normal kind of hedgehog position. Which, by the way, black tries to avoid, and he plays a move that I kind of see now for the first time. Plays knight a6. Okay, knight a6, I think we can both agree that that's not a good move, because it's true, it's developing the knight on the edge. I guess opponent was mainly afraid of knight c6 d5 and then couldn't really come up with a nice square for the knight. I mean, knight d5 is not really that bad, and it could potentially transpose to some theoretical lines after knight d2 and then a6, rook b8, b5. This is like definitely yeah, quite a well analyzed and popular line, but he plays knight to a6 instead. We see b3, simply setting up the little double fianchetto. Black decides now to take and bring the knight towards c5. Okay, this does not look so bad after all, you may be wondering. And yeah, let's just see how the game continues. Magnus just fianchettos his bishops, plays queen d2, connecting the rooks, and opponent goes for a6. Rook fd1, bishop to d7, kind of preparing the somewhat standard b5 break. Magnus simply goes rook ac1, and now black is a little bit hesitant to play b5, because say if you had to play it at this specific move, well, besides the fact that we don't necessarily have to take, I think definitely something that could have bothered black a little was cb, ab, and then personally, I would even be a little bit worried of a move such as knight c6, kind of forcing him to give up the bishop pair. But the computer thinks that b4 is even a bit more precise, hitting the knight first, and in case, let's say, the knight goes back, then we could go knight c6. Then after bishop takes, black's position is less active. They've got like a fixed pawn, and white definitely has the better position with the two bishop. Now, this obviously did not happen in the game, and I think black should have gone for b5, since it was probably first and last chance for yeah, crossing half of the board against Magnus Carlsen. He just plays the move knight e6, which is As a concept, not terrible. Okay, black has the less space. We can definitely see that this pawn is advanced on the fourth rank, while black has no pawns on the fourth. I mean, on the fifth rank himself, and this just gives white better control over the center because the pawn is controlling away the important d5 square. Like really, when you're playing the game of chess, it really comes down to all this beautiful squares, and we can see that one of our pawns is controlling a pawn in the, I mean, not controlling a pawn, but controlling a square that's placed in the enemy side of the board, while opponent doesn't have such pawn. And we can both agree on the fact that this gives white a little bit more space. So, what to do when you have less space? Obviously, trading pieces will make it easier to maneuver with less space, and that's what the black players tries to do. However, Magnus has a different idea. He plays knight c2. Obviously, being well aware of the strategy that we kind of talked about. So now black just goes for the move queen to c7. Again, I don't really get why he did not play b5 once again, but that's not really that relevant. And we do get to see knight e3 by Magnus. The knights are actually kind of cooperating really nicely, and we may very soon just see a beast arriving on d5. Black tries bishop to c6, but now knight d5 is super annoying. Just think about it. If you take, you just lose on the spot. After pawn takes, bishop pinned, we're just like winning a piece. Same situation after bishop takes, pawn takes creates a double attack, and in case of knight c5, that is simply b4 move. The knight is pinned, white wins a piece. So black found himself in a situation where he's forced to play queen d8, but now after knight takes on f6, what white achieves is the fact that black is now forced to take with a pawn after this trade. Yeah, sort of decisively weakening the six pawn, which white just goes ahead and collects, and the rest is just a technical part. White's trading everything. King is centralizing. Really, the rest is not that important. I mean, we can kind of quickly scroll through the moves. White picked up another pawn in the process, and yeah, black just either ran out of time or resigned in this position where he was about to win the 80 pawn, but white is still up LT pawn with a winning position, and yeah, that's how this game ended. So I found this game really nice. It's just kind of a typical squeeze with the hedgehog against a low rated player. Just get your pieces nice to the center and get a positional win after 95 since black has no active moves. So yeah, with that being said, I think we can move on to the next game. Once again, in the following game, Magnus is 11 years of age, and his opponent is rated close to 2300. So he's playing against somebody that's on average has the strength of FIDE Master. I think we can speculate. And the game starts with d4. We see knight f6, and then after e6, knight f3, black goes for the Queen's Indian defense. I mean, if you're confused about how these openings are named, uh, Queen's Bishop going there, Queen's 8 Fianchero, Queen's Indian, King's Bishop going there, King's 8 Fianchero, King's Indian. So hope that makes it a little bit easier to remember. White goes for a Fianchero himself, and we just get sort of a typical theoretical line. Black throws in this check, kind of misplacing a little bit the white bishop on d2, because then potentially knight e4 could be a pretty annoying idea that's hitting white's dark square bishop. We see knight to c3, d6, bishop to g5, and again, don't take this video as a theoretical guide. I mean, we're talking about games that were played in like 2001, so computers were like just starting to develop, and opening theory definitely dramatically changed. So try to take it more as a, let's say, middle game kind of guide, and learn some practical things that even an 11 years old kid can do. So after h6, Magnus goes for bishop takes on f6. bishop takes, and just queen d3. Kind of an innocent looking move, just, connecting the rooks, developing the queen. Black ignores it and plays 97. And perhaps you can try to pause the video here as the eval bar is rising up and try to find the best move for white in this position, because it looks like both sides have played only natural looking moves. You may be wondering what on earth could be wrong with black's position. Well, take a little bit of your time and try to find a pretty surprising maneuver that white has. And okay, it's definitely a very standard trick. I'm pretty sure Magnus had it in mind while playing queen d3, and now he just goes for the move knight g5, which does look like hanging a knight. And also, I wouldn't really put this in tactics category, because at the beginning of the video I said there's gonna be like no tactics involved. I mean, this is just a trade after all. Okay, it's just forcing a trade. It's not a tactic. Okay, it's not a move that a beginner could spot easily, but threatening mate in one and hitting the bishop. So black had to take, and now bishop takes on b7. Simply we trade the knight for bishop. Rook to b8, bishop goes back. And we get into a position where white is simply better because the square is very weak. You may be wondering, okay, but how could possibly white take advantage of that? Well, after black played the move bishop to f6, white went for the move knight b5. And I know this may look like one of those classical patzer moves, just going for one movers instead of thinking in terms of pawn breaks. White just simply is attacking the a7 pawn. But here's maybe another good moment to pause the video and think about what is potentially white's idea after black just goes for the most obvious move, hitting the b5 knight. And indeed, here we should be going for the rather odd looking knight a7, because there is no way for black to stop the knight c6 move from coming, and then black's position is really cramped. The knight is just like such an annoying piece on that square. White simply continues to expand. Black helps a little bit by playing a5 and creating a weakness, which, Magnus needs no second invitation to start attacking. We see c5, simply demolishing the queen side, and after cd6, queen takes d6 happened in the game. Taking with the pawn was also not really helping, because after queen to b5, there is a big threat of bishop takes on d5, and a move such as knight c7 is still lost because of queen b7, deadly pinning the knight, threatening to move the knight away, opening up rook's path, and black is still having a losing position. So instead of this, queen takes on d6 happened in the game, but this is simply losing material after e4, knight trade, and the point of this is that now the fork kind of finishes the game. Bishop takes on e5 was tried, but there is bishop takes on a8 at the end of the line, and rook takes on a8 still. Quite bad for black, because queen e4 is unpinning and then winning the bishop. Black tried bishop to d4, kind of going for last trick, threatening to go for a discovery, but rook to d1 simply forced resignation. So I hope you guys enjoy this game. Just a nice little trick that you can use if you're facing this kind of fianchetto structure, in case you're maybe like a Catalan player. Definitely keep in mind this little trick of going knight g5. That's why for black it was a bit better to play the move c6 instead, kind of restricting the bishop, but at least making sure this is not a thing now that this diagonal is closed, and black still has quite a solid position with the two bishops in the long run. Thanks a lot for making it this far into the video, and if you're really enjoying me breaking down games played by Magnus Carlsen, make sure to click the video that will appear on the screen. So thanks again, and I'll see you around on the channel. Take care.